best and quickest way of knowing that you're in a rainforest is the density of the vegetation. They're generally quite dense, dark and moist areas compared to the more open eucalypt forests that surround them. Often there are a lot of vines, palms, ferns, and in some types of rainforest, epiphytes, so trees that grow on, or plants that grow on other trees. Things such as bird's nest fern, staghorn, elkhorn, and a whole lot of orchids. In some of the rainforests here on the Dorrigo Plateau, there are a large number of epiphytes, and they're a really good characteristic of rainforests. They're often characterized by an emergent canopy, so in this case a yellow carabine tree, which might be 30 to 40 metres tall, and then there'll be a layer below that, a canopy layer below that. In this case it's mostly made up of coachwood, which is the classic warm temperate rainforest species, and below that, at the ground level, a fairly dense layer of walking stick palm. On the Dorrigo Plateau there are 4 different types of rainforest, or classes of rainforest. Warm temperate, such as we're in, which is characterised, it's classically defined by coachwood. Also plants such as crabapple and a few of the other closely related trees. The subtropical rainforests, which have a host of booyongs, both white and black booyong in parts of the Dorrigo Plateau. Yellow carabine is a classic subtropical rainforest tree. There are often big strangler figs, so big emergent figs, and often a lot of palms. The cool temperate rainforests, which occur right on the very mountaintops. The classic species that characterises it is the Antarctic beech, which is one of the most ancient trees on the planet. It's been here since the Gondwanan times, when Australia was part of the great southern supercontinent. And the final type of rainforest, or class of rainforest, is dry rainforest, which is often characterised by hoop pines, so big emergent hoop pines, by plants such as grey myrtle, sometimes giant stinging tree, and they're in areas with dry rainforests occupy sites with quite shallow soils, rain shadow areas such as the Guy Fawkes Gorges, and areas which are generally drier. It does seem a bit of a misnomer, dry rainforest, but it simply means that they occupy sites which have a lower rainfall than the adjoining warm temperate, cool temperate and subtropical rainforests. They can often have half the rainfall of the wetter types of rainforests. So rocky ravines, gorges and very exposed sites for dry rainforests. There are a lot of very sensitive relic species, animals which go right back to Gondwanan times. The classic example of that is a whole lot of frogs, which are completely dependent upon rainforest areas. So around us here, things such as the pouch frog, which is no more than 2 centimetres long. It lives in the leaf litter and it breeds in a way where the females lay their eggs on the ground. The eggs are fertilised and hatched, and the male has hip pockets or pouches, and he places himself against the tadpoles, and the tadpoles enter the hip pockets, they seal up, and then the frogs or the tadpoles emerge as fully formed but absolutely minuscule frogs, a few millimetres long. So they only live in dense, moist areas of rainforest on the Dorrigo Plateau. The stuttering frog is another good example. The sooty owl, it mostly lives within rainforest where it feeds upon possums. It will occupy some of the adjoining wet sclerophyll, the dense wet sclerophyll forests, but if it didn't have rainforest it wouldn't be here. There's a whole lot of invertebrates which are only known from rainforests, and a whole lot of plants which only live in the rainforests of the Dorrigo Plateau. Plants such as the Dorrigo waratah. There's a tiny little population on the border ranges up near the Queensland border, but most of its population is in the Dorrigo rainforest. The mountain denhamia, which only lives between Mount Highland and Point Lookout. The Dorrigo daisy, which germinates in patches in the forest when there's tree fall or soil disturbance. It kind of lurks at the edge of rainforests. So there's a whole host of plants and animals which are highly dependent upon the rainforests of the Dorrigo Plateau, and any degradation to that or any reduction to rainforest will lead to a loss of these sensitive rainforest species. I guess as well as certainly mentioning the sooty owl, there are a number of other birds such as the olive whistler, which lives in mountainous rainforest, mostly cool temperate rainforest. So right up near the peak of Mount Highland, we're at about 900 metres or so here. Another 400 metres to our west elevation, of climbing elevation, is the peak of Mount Highland. Olive whistlers are frequently seen there, and as are sphagnum frogs, which are a little tiny frog which about that big, which lives in headwater soaks, so very damp areas on the forest floor. Doesn't breed in flowing water, but breeds in little tiny moist pockets, little egg-shaped burrows that it excavates in the forest floor. I guess another rainforest-dependent fauna species is the Stevens banded snake, up to about a metre and a half, with dull black and white bands on its back. It lives in tree hollows and occupies good areas of rainforest, so there are good numbers of Stevens banded snakes on the Dorrigo Plateau. Rainforests are very sensitive to fire, so fire, I guess for the future and the health of rainforests, fire doesn't really have a role to play. That said though, rainforests under dry climatic conditions, low humidity, and I guess basically drought and spring hot winds, or under drought conditions and spring hot winds, rainforests will burn. So the leaf litter is generally quite moist. Currently there's been a fair bit of rain in the tail end of summer and things are very moist, but if that leaf litter dries out, and it will dry out from time to time, rainforests will burn. Things like the walking stick palm are very sensitive to fire. If they have any heat on their stem, it's likely to kill them. A lot of the vines around us as well are very sensitive to fire, so they just die. There are a few rainforest trees which have characteristics which kind of buffer them from fire, and they generally live at the edge of rainforest, things such as plants such as the scentless rosewood and the tree heath, and they have some capacity to reshoot after fire, but your smooth-barked yellow carabines and coachwoods and the like, they have no tolerance to fire. So if a fire with any real severity or intensity and heat comes through rainforest, you find that there's just a mass mortality, a major loss of rainforest species, so rainforest plants. So either side of the road, the soils are the same, the rainfall should be about the same, the aspects are quite similar because they're on the level at the top, so the immense differences are all attributable to frequent burning in this patch of bushland, and it really is a great contrast between this side of the road and the eastern side. Buffer rainforest areas from fire, to encourage regeneration around rainforests, to give them a greater buffer, to replant rainforest species to better protect them, and to use fire management techniques which keep fire out of rainforest. So good exclusion lines, control and containment lines along walking tracks or roads to make sure that rainforests aren't burnt. There's been a lot of damage to rainforest in recent years with a series of very hot springs and summers, and large areas of rainforest have been lost because of these very hot fires. So there's a great need to protect all existing areas of rainforest and to allow for the expansion of rainforest. Now when intense fires do enter rainforests, particularly in places like the Dorrigo Plateau and Barrington Tops, you'll find that sometimes after the fire, the rainforests have been opened up to the extent that eucalypts, so blue gums or New England blackbutts, eucalypts that occupy sites adjoining rainforest, that their seed fall can come into those recently burnt areas, and eucalypts can then establish. The types of time frames we're talking about are in the order of many, many centuries, and certainly around Mount Highland there are patches of dense very old rainforest with a very occasional eucalyptus emergent, and what that indicates is that some centuries ago, and potentially thousands of years ago, there'd been quite an intense fire in some of those rainforest patches. Of course, today we're dealing with a highly fragmented system where there's a lot less rainforest on the Dorrigo Plateau than there once was, so every bit takes on a greater degree of importance. And what we're really striving for through this project is to for everybody to work collectively across the plateau to make sure that rainforest isn't going to be burnt and that it can be reconnected and well buffered and better managed when it comes to fire.